Hello and welcome to Canada Life's panel discussion exploring the longevity megatrend and what it means for society and employers in the UK. My name is Rebecca Gladstone, the Head of Public Policy and PR at Canada Life. Over the last 2 years, we have been looking into the topic of longevity through our Life100 research programme and the opportunities and challenges that will come as we all live longer lives. Our latest report deep dives into the implications of increasing longevity for the world of work. And I am joined by a fantastic group of longevity experts from some of the UK's leading organisations to explore this topic in more detail. Lindsay Simpson is the CEO and founder of 55 Redefined, a global leader in enterprise age intelligence and technology solutions. She works with some of the world's largest organisations to help them attract, engage, and grow over 50s talent and consumers. David Sinclair is the CEO of the International Longevity Centre UK, the UK's leading authority on the impact of longevity on society. Lisa Edgar is an award-winning speaker on longevity and the CEO of The Big Window, a leading research consultancy and Canada Life's Life100 research partner. And Keely Vanstone, Head of Marketing, Brand and Comms, and the leader of the Life100 initiative at Canada Life UK, who will be talking through how our work is supporting employers' understanding of longevity in the workplace. Welcome, everybody. So Lisa, if I can start with you, please. What exactly is the longevity megatrend and why does it matter?
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, everyone. Look, we think about the longevity megatrend as being double-edged, if you like, incorporating two forces. On the one hand, around falling birth rates, and on the other hand, around living longer. So if I start with falling birth rates first, we can see this trend across the world. Also true, and I have to confess, is that there are now more pets per household than kind of children per household. And I have to confess that with my own dog, Winnie. On the other hand, we're also living longer as well. We know there's a pretty significant chance of us or someone being born today living to 100. Just thinking about that is, it's eye-opening. In many countries, that people being born today, 1 in 2 chance of living to 100. And David, you'll be really aware of these numbers too. Those people living to 80 and beyond over the next kind of 10 to 20 years will reach 6.6 million. And to give everyone perspective of that is a third of the population of Australia being over 80 in the UK in the not too distant future. So incredible. And also in that time span, the people over 100 would fill one of my favourite places in the UK, Lord's Cricket Ground. These are very big numbers, and it's here to stay as well, despite COVID. Longevity is here to stay, and not least because there's an incredible amount of money and investment in places like the Middle East and others going into curing aging. So we're expecting these numbers to kind of stay with us. So the question then is, as you quite rightly pose, why does it matter? And it matters because we're simply not equipped at the moment to work with longer lives. The shape of the way that we think of our lives needs to change, really. It's too structured, too rigid, and I'm sure that at some point during our conversation today, we'll come back to that structure. But unless we deal with it, unless we change the way that we think about aging, the work that Lindsay's doing magnificently and others, then we only see longevity as a challenge rather than what it could be, which is an opportunity. Unless we change it, then we can't realise the longevity dividend or realise the contribution that older people can give to society. At the moment, we know it's true, but we don't recognise it.
Yeah.
So it's happening and it matters.
Yeah, thank you. And David, the ILC is a global organisation. So in terms of what you're seeing in the UK and around the world, how is this manifesting?
Yeah. So look, we've been aging actually over about 300 years. It's not a new thing, and actually aging painfully slowly in some ways, no, not quickly in most places. So whether you've been in France or Germany or Japan or the US, we've witnessed aging over a very, very long period. The common challenge you see in most countries across the world is we're aging pretty poorly and we're not adapting to those long lives.
Mm.
So, for example, we're actually working a lower proportion of our lives than we used to. We're actually in the UK, every generation coming through is in poorer health than future generations. And actually, we are completely failing to adapt our towns and cities to more and more older people, and indeed ensure our towns and cities still support younger people, because we've got more older people. One thing to think about though is I don't think we're aging anymore. I think we're old. The really interesting thing is that actually we are now an older society, and it isn't. One thing I pick up is I don't think and we sometimes use the word of the term you know, living longer lives. We're not living longer lives. We're living long lives. Life expectancy probably won't grow very much more. The
Mhm.
real challenge now is the gap between life expectancy and healthy life expectancy and how we narrow that.
And why is Canada Life so interested in this as a topic, Healy?
Yeah, so obviously Canada Life's a financial services organisation focused on supporting people in the workplace and also into retirement. And we were looking at what's happening out there and what's important in terms of macro trends and up longevity and the impact of living longer on the work that we do to support people in the workplace or indeed into their retirement. So a really important topic for financial services. For Canada Life, we look after 3.3 million people in the UK, which is a significant responsibility that we've got. And so we needed to understand it really well to know how do we solve for this future and what do we need to do. And finally, we're also a relatively large employer in the UK. So for us as an employer, there's lots that we need to be doing to think about how we might evolve the future too. So that's why we're focused on it.
Fantastic. And Lindsay, employers obviously have a key role to play here. So from your area, what should employers be thinking about and how should they be adapting and preparing?
So I think most employers are aware of the longevity trend. They're aware that people are having less babies. They're aware that the world is aging and that this is a mega trend that is kind of on their mid-term horizon. It still comes as a real shock to them when they realise that the largest and fastest growing component of their workforce is typically aged over 50. And then they're trying to navigate at the same time 5 generations within their workforce. And in some of our employers, actually 6 generations in the workforce together, literally the extremes. If I look at things like grocery retail, where you have teenagers and people in their 90s working alongside each other. And what we're seeing with that phenomenon is that we're on new ground. So people haven't worked in these multi-generational environments before. And so that requires different skills. And we expect our middle managers to somehow miraculously understand how to motivate somebody 20 years younger than them and 30 years older than them when they can't even, settle on where should we all go for our Christmas drinks and make everybody happy. And so I'm in jest, but it has profound implications for boards. So, we are very fortunate to be the global leader in workforce solutions for ageing populations and ageing workforces in particular. And we come at it from 3 angles, which is the 3 Cs. So what's the impact on the colleague experience as people are ageing and staying in work for significantly longer or need to stay in work for significantly longer? What's the impact on customers who are ageing at the same rate as the general population, so are demanding different products, different solutions, different ways of being marketed to and spoken to by those organisations? And then what's the impact on the company? So how does this impact their global statement, their mission and their future strategy to lean in, as we were saying, as Lisa was saying, rather than lean out. So see this as an opportunity rather than see this as a threat. And so in terms of what employers typically need to do is they need to look at their data, they need to look at their skills strategy, and then they need to look at their legal and policy strategy. And the work that Canada Life have done in the 100-Year Life is an absolute essential read for any employer. It's setting out the massive disparity that's happening between what employers think. For example, employers think that people retire early because they're in ill health. But actually they don't. They're not retiring because they're in ill health. That's only 18% versus the 55% that employers think. And we see that day in, day out. We see, for example, through our cohorts that run through Me Redefined, we see that an employer might give us a cohort of people that they think are 1 year out from retiring. And we'll find out immediately that group are less than 10% thinking of retirement. And what they actually want to do is travel more. They want more time out. They want to lean in and change career. They want more flexible work. And so we have to start navigating the future of work around how do people live longer, but then how do they work less and live more? So we create these glide paths in our workplaces that mean that people can comfortably work, even with health conditions, into their 70s and beyond, and the structure that surrounds that enables that.
And what's very clear, I think, from our research is that employers need help to take them on this journey. It's not something that they are equipped for or necessarily thinking about. And Keely, how is Canada Life working with employers on this challenge?
Yeah, so a couple of things to raise based on what you said, Lindsay. One is that in our research, which we did with 3,200 consumers and 600 employers, so we're really trying to get to the nub of, what's going on for people, was that only 1 in 8 have a longevity strategy in place. And so whilst employers recognise the issue and recognise the need to do something, only 1 in 8 are actually doing anything about it. And then from that, we looked at, what's going on in the workplace? And there were 4 key things. The first is motivations are different. So as you get older, your motivations become more about how you want to give back, what sort of purpose you have, and how a workplace can accommodate for that. In terms of the structure of work, that needs to look different. How does a multi-generational team work? What does that structure look like? In rewarding, this is really interesting for Canada Life, we found that people who think about living longer then value their protection benefits more because they want to be healthy and in the workplace. And then finally, it's about multi-generational teams and how you get all of those generations working together and agreeing on their Christmas destination. So we've raised a lot of really important challenges, and now it's about how do the right people work together to solve them.
Can I bring to life a couple of examples just around what Keely was saying there? So in terms of what people want and how that changes as we age, that plays out globally for us. We can look in any industry, any sector. We're the largest data gatherer of workforce aging profiles, and we see that people want progression, not promotion. They're not looking for another rung on the ladder. They're looking to grow. They're looking to learn new skills. Yet most of the hierarchy of talent and performance management in organisations is based on an upward mobility piece. And on the reward piece, that's really interesting because things like healthcare, protection benefits, but even how they show up to work. So a colleague over 50 is typically 200% less likely to take a day off work sick than a colleague under 30. And so even when they have a critical illness diagnosis, their major priority is to remain in work and to stay in work, which is different when we're in our younger ages. And so that reward piece becomes super important, but we've become afraid of it. Because age is a protected characteristic, employers are scared around how to navigate the topic. They need advice. They need to understand, if you can't ask somebody when you're going to retire, then how do we navigate this big conversation that means that the individual's sitting there thinking, well, I'm here for another 15 years and you're writing me off as if I'm going next year and we need to do something about this. And so that, that leaning into those reward pieces and really understanding that we have different motivations at different different ages is not discriminatory. It's creating an employee value proposition that values people at different ages and different life stages as they grow through the organisation.
I think that's absolutely right, Lindsay. If I can come in off the back of that, all the data that we've collected shows not only are those motivational changes in favour of the employer, but our decision-making ability changes in a positive net as we get older as well. So we make our best financial decisions in our 50s and 60s because we've accumulated what we'd call crystallized intelligence over those years. If we can realize the value of that contribution, we'll be setting out to deal with longevity or long lives in a much more kind of positive and valuable way. So completely agree with that, and fantastic to hear as well.
Yeah. What's also really interesting from our research is that employers are also turning to the public sector and government to play a role here and to help, I guess, provide that framework and that direction when it comes to how they should be approaching this topic. So, David, from your perspective, what are you seeing in terms of how the UK government and policy is approaching this?
Well, I suppose one of the things to say first is that one of the reasons it's great that Canada Life are engaged in this is so many organisations aren't, frankly. We've just seen demography fall off the World Economic Forum list of risks for businesses. So actually there is an element for where government actually probably needs a bit of stick as well as a bit of carrot. I think there are some really fascinating opportunities for government, though, around clearly challenging issues around the state pension age. Government should be stronger at talking to us about what the purpose of retirement is and how we should be spending our time as we get older. I think rather than the government spending 2 years worrying about how it implements the Mayfield review, it should be doing it now and should, be massively reducing the restrictions employers have on investing in occupational health. The really daft one, for example, as an employer, we can pay for a flu vaccine because it's below the trivial limits. We can't pay for a COVID vaccine because it's above £50. It's completely daft that we're not allowing employers to invest in the health of the workforce. So governments have got to make that a lot easier for people. We have age discrimination legislation in the workplace. I think government could do a little bit more around how, and linking into your point around how you can better support flexible retirements as well as flexible working. So not just we stop working tomorrow. And then, are there things that government could learn from, for example, your protection products? If you guys are really good at getting people back into work, how do we take those messages back to government? If you're really good at getting people back to work after someone's had a mental health incident or after someone has had other sort of physical disability, what can government do to make sure people don't just end up on incapacity benefits or universal credit, and how can we learn from the sector? And clearly, a greater coverage of protection benefits or understanding of the lessons from the way protection is provided could be extraordinarily useful for public policy.
So moving away from the world of work for just a moment, Lisa, what else are we seeing beyond how employers are approaching this?
This is the exciting bit. So we're working with the Stanford Centre of Longevity at the moment through the Big Window, but also the newly established Lisbon Centre for Longevity as well, and other leaders across the world, how the kind of structure of life is changing, and how we need to and can move away from a more rigid structure, linear structure, to something that's more kind of fluid and adaptive. And I've noted how many times we've used the word adapt already in our chat today. We've been too rooted, I think, in a kind of yesteryear version of life, where we might have learned for 15 years, worked for 45 years. This should resonate with you as well, Lindsay. And then, believed we were initially geared up to perhaps retire for 10 to 15 years. Now that we're living long lives, now that the structure of the population is changing, we could be in retirement on that old way of thinking as long as we're in work. And that is simply unsustainable. For employers, of course, it's unsustainable in that they kind of need the best brains in their kind of workplaces as long as possible. For governments, it's unsustainable, and we've kind of seen the argument around the pension levers, etc. How do you use a current workforce to pay for an older population when it is so unbalanced? And then for individuals, it's unsustainable because all of us around this table have to find a route financially to live a long life, and to live a long life that is sustainable for our health, wealth, and self. Those three pillars are extremely important to us. And what does that mean? That means that as consumers, as customers, as employees, as citizens, that we have to change the shape of life. Stanford have coined the term the new map of life, but one that's much more adaptive, one that feels a bit less like a linear puzzle and more like an Easter egg hunt. You're in the garden, you get to the next point, you unwrap the Easter egg, you enjoy some of the fruits of that. But then you find the clue to the next bit. You review, you plan, you might retrace some of your steps, you might think about the holistic goal, kind of once again. And it's that flexible reviewing and adapting that we need to kind of get much more into, and that has an implication on the products, the services, the support mechanisms that providers like Canada Life put in place. They simply have to equip people to get into that flexible, mindset. And we have seen through our data, haven't we, Keely, that once you get people into planning mode, once you make people adaptive planners from much earlier on in their lives, what we can see in the data is they're then more optimistic, they feel more in control, and they are stronger on every mnemonic measure: happiness, well-being, life satisfaction. In fact, becoming adaptive planners means that you shallow out that classic U-shape of life. So if we can restructure life to make it much more fluid, much less rigid, much more linear, using, kind of the talent knowledge that 55 Redefined, the data that we've got at the big window, etc., the work that ILC have done, then we will truly, get to the longevity dividend in a true way.
And I think, I suppose, just a couple of stats about John Maynard Keynes, the economist, talked about the 15-hour working week. Whenever you see news stories about this, people think, "Oh God, why the hell didn't this happen?" You know what? It happened. It's happened. We work less than 15 hours as a working week on average across our life course. But what we have done is we now squeeze all of that work in between about 20 and about 50. Actually, we now have much more time of our lives where we're not in work. So we've squeezed, at the point people are having children, people are in their best health, people are wanting to do different things. We said, well, actually, that's the point. You've also got to be the most intense work, and this is why we've bred mental health issues in the workplace, place, we've designed work in a really, really bad way. And what this has resulted in is a place where in the UK, we only work for about 31 years of our adult lives. It is completely economically unsustainable to work for 30 years of our adult lives and expect the state and our private pensions are going to then cover us for another 50 years. There is no way the numbers add up. Now, they used to add up because there were lots of people of working age and not many older people. But frankly, it doesn't work. And we had growth, but it doesn't work anymore. So actually, we're going to have to get used to the idea of working longer throughout our lives. And as you say, a bit of coming in and out of work at different points. And I don't think this necessarily means people, we're all going to have to work until we're 70 or 80. I think what it means is that actually people who are currently 50, we're stopping work at 50, we need to work out through perhaps some of the support you provide, how you support them to work to 52, how you get people who are currently working to 70 to get them to work to 72. So it's just a little bit more. And the main reason for that is that putting aside the state benefit and the fact we spend more in work. So when we're working, we actually consume more. We have a massive consumption problem that older people don't spend the money they've got. So work is also good for consumption. But actually, you've got a real challenge with how you can. But actually, we've got to change that way of work because. The real value of changing that is that let's say we work 1 year longer. If we work 1 year longer, you have 1 year more of compound interest. You have 1 year more of pension savings. You have 1 year fewer of drawing down your pension. So it's not just the working longer. There is a triple whammy benefit of working 1 year longer, which we somehow, and can Canada Life, can you find ways of communicating this? Literally every month is not just a month's extra pay. It's a month's extra pension and a month less drawing down. Really, really powerful message for people that if we can play on the fringes with supporting people to work just a tiny bit longer and differently.
I love the idea of success at the margin.
Yeah.
I've got some really real-time insight on this topic. So for the last 2.5 years, we've been running consumer trials and employee trials with how do we educate people to understand their longer lives? How do we get people to think about their finances and engage with financial well-being sooner? How do we extend people's working careers? And, where I'm sitting here today, I know how we can add at least 5 years to people's career horizons. And what I can tell you with confidence, it is not waving more money at them. So money is not the driver. And equally, if you just tell somebody that they need to invest in their pension, they won't do it. It's just an amorphic, huge question. How much money do I need for the next 50 years? I've no idea. Am I working? Am I not? Am I healthy? Am I not? Am I married? Am I not? Too many open questions. And so actually supporting people to have a plan in midlife, in work and outside of work is critical. And 93% of over 50s in work believe that they are unsupported by their employer in midlife. They're the missed middle that are just left to wither on the vine. And so I think this presents a huge opportunity because we know that there are mechanisms that you can add people's horizons to their careers. We then know that once you add their horizon, they're more engaged in wanting to understand about their financial health. But the piece I then wanted to pick up, which you pointed out there really, David, was around then education. So one of those points is around understanding compounding of pensions. But one of the biggest misnomers we see, so, I won't name names of employers, but in some of the very large scale employers that see that they've got brilliant flexible working and they can't quite understand why their older cohorts continue to retire. It's often as simple as the fact that they are participating in a defined benefit pension scheme that closed a decade ago. And no one's told them that if they go part-time or go onto a flexible contract, it's not going to impact their pension. So they retire and then they go and work part-time somewhere else because they don't know that they can retire on full pension and there's any mechanism. So there's some real quick wins that can be done around education, but you've got to start with, what Lisa said, you've got to help people plan, and you've got to realise that nobody's got the key to this, because the generations that hit in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s now, they are pioneers and they can't look to their parents for the roadmap because they had a completely different life expectancy and journey. And so it's up to us as employers, as providers, to really provide the navigational tools that both employers and employees need to really map out this next phase of life.
It's a very connecting topic. So when we're thinking about engagement and education and how do you shift the dial, it's really engaging for people because you can connect to it on a human level, on a family level, and so forth.
Everyone's a day older today than they were yesterday.
Everyone. So you think, well, where's the opportunity here then to think differently about using that as an engagement tool in what your future looks like? And so we did some work on the curve of life, so the U-shape life satisfaction curve. And if you're living longer, does that mean that your life satisfaction is going to be low for longer? Is that where we're going to be? So how do you get out of that dip? And the answer is by taking control. And we know as a financial services organisation how you can take control through getting advice, speaking to your family, moving things forward, setting goals. So if we can get people to connect to it through thinking about living longer and living to 100, and then we can translate that into tools and support and education that really help people to then have those solutions. And then on top of that, innovating with new solutions for it, then that's got to be a really exciting place.
People don't want this fixed decision, this cliff edge of I'm working and now I'm retired. In fact, I don't think I'll offend anybody around the table by saying that, most of you know that I'm on a mission to retire the term retirement. It should be a purpose-led endeavour in the next stage of life, whereas retirement and the cliches and the definitions that come from it no longer serve us as humans and as economies. But what we find is that when people want to then, I'm going to take 6 months off as a sabbatical, which means I need a bit of a pension income, and then I'm going to go back to work for a year, which means I don't need a pension income. These are complex choices, that people don't know how to navigate the tools and the products that give them this flexibility to start and stop a pension income. And of course, lots of products don't allow you that flexibility, and that is absolutely where the government can help around that and preventative healthcare. But what we're seeing is, I think, employers and providers have to come together.
Fantastic. So finally, a note to end on. I would love to go to each of you in turn to ask, what is the one thing that you would like people to take away from the conversation today? I'll come to you first, Lindsay.
Yeah, thank you. Well, for me, as an organisation, if you're viewing this, whether you're an individual, or representing the company, if you don't have an age strategy, you don't have a growth strategy. And when I say an age strategy, I mean all components, those 4 key pillars of the Life100 report. How are you going to motivate people? How are you going to look at the different things across your life course of your employees and have a clear reward, benefit, and workplace strategy that enables everybody of every age to thrive at work?
Mine would be to engage in it, engage and innovate. So companies like Canada Life are bringing forward this insight. People like 55 Redefined, Big Window, ILC, we're engaging in the debate because we care about it and we want to make a difference. And I would encourage everyone to get on board with it and to really understand it and move things forward.
And I think for me, long lives offer a huge opportunity. If we keep people healthy, they work longer, they volunteer more, they provide more care, and they actually spend more money. So there is an economic opportunity here for individuals and businesses.
And mine is what we're hearing from many financial services providers across the world at the moment. How do we get people to think differently about the shape of their lives? How do we get people to think about the shape of our lives as a composite of many different things that are fluid, that are dynamic, that you can kind of move in between them throughout life, so that you can go back to work after a sabbatical in your 60s and 70s.
And change work.
So my big message is, how do we pull those small levers to get people to think differently about the shape of life?
And what a brilliant note to end on. Thank you. Thank you to all of our panellists for that fascinating conversation on what longevity means for all of us.